Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Buzz podcast. Thanks for joining us as we continue to talk about lots of different things in the Catholic world. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Josh, welcome.
Thank you.
And Matt Van Milligan.
Hello.
Matthew, so nice to see you today as we are talking about a topic that some of us have experienced. I mean, I've done it. I've done it before in my life. We're talking about church hopping. Church hopping.
What is church hopping for
by
those
church
people who don't
hopping?
mean? Yeah.
Well, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you do have your own parish? I hope,
Yeah.
right? But you go to other parishes, you go to other churches, you go to other events at churches, you go to mass at different churches, right? So that's what we'll say about church hopping is. But there are different motivations, I think, right? Like sometimes, like everyone, I shouldn't say everyone has their own parish. There are people who probably don't. But I remember as a university student, based on my work schedule, I would go to whatever mass I could on the weekend, right? So sometimes it would be a Saturday vigil mass at 4:00 somewhere. Sometimes it would be like the Sunday night mass at 7:00. And I mean at different parishes, at different churches, right? So I would calculate like where I could celebrate mass that weekend based on my schedule. So it happens. Now the problem is like, is it a problem? Is it a problem for people to go elsewhere? And I think maybe that's worth a chat because lots of people are doing it.
I think there's two things to think about here. I don't think it's a problem for you to church hop in the sense of why you're church hopping would be the question. I think like when we moved up to Thunder Bay, we specifically were church hopping to find the parish that we wanted to belong to. There was a parish just down the road from us, like quite literally 2 blocks away. But there were other parishes like I was looking for the best place to grow my family, to grow my kids. Where are the places that my family is going to be able to grow the most, that I can grow my faith, my wife can grow in her faith, and our children can grow in her faith together. And so we kind of looked for that community and everything else. And we found one place. It was a great little parish. It was not little. It was a big parish, very welcoming. In fact, out of the 1,000 people that were at Mass, they actually stood us up and welcomed us to the parish at the end of Mass, which was amazing. And they announced our names. They knew our names. They knew everything about us. And it was for me, it was a very welcoming. We felt welcomed in that parish. But then, just a little bit later, after about 2 or 3 months, there were some things that were coming up in the parish that weren't quite right. There was things that we not disagreed with, but things that we kind of causing our soul just kind of whatever. And there was another church that we were going to. Now the first church had great music, had great welcoming spirit and everything else, but the way they were treating the Eucharist, I just didn't sit right with me. But at this other church, it was very reverent, but the music wasn't so good, and they didn't have a smaller, like they didn't have a children's liturgy, and they didn't have those things. And so my family, like my wife and I, had to really pray about. I started going there for daily mass because the priest was awesome, and I was really getting a lot of this out of the homily as well as like just the mass and the reverence and everything else. And we had to really pray about: do we switch parishes? Do we what's the most important thing here? So that's I think church hopping is not bad necessarily to find this place, but I'm going to say that eventually you have to settle down. Part of it is being like not just a church hop so that you don't have to be involved with any church community, because I think a big part of our faith is being part of a community. So you can like start reading, you can start being part of the choir, you can start doing whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good, a really good point that it's always with the goal of finding home, that you don't remain transient. But I think you made a really good kind of distinction there, that people do this for different reasons. People have different motives, and not all parishes are the same. And people are drawn to different aspects of the Catholic faith. Some people are more fed or fulfilled by good preaching. Some, it's music.
It's the beauty.
It's the beauty of the church itself that maybe drew them. But I think we can draw kind of a useful distinction between kind of substance and style. That if you even if you like all of the kind of stylistic elements, or they have a good organist, or they have some of these kind of nice aesthetic things that I find attractive, if there's a substantial problem there, if they're being irreverent towards the Blessed Sacrament, or there's a theological problem, or something that's more kind of substantial or at root, you're probably justified in going somewhere where the Eucharist is properly treated. Or, but it's interesting because I come at this from doing a lot of church hopping in my Protestant life. That you don't actually have that same conflict. You don't have that problem because you don't have the sacraments per se. All of the content of your faith is the preaching, the music, the whatever. So you have a lot of different church communities diversifying. This church is all about music. This church is all about teaching.
Yeah.
This church is all about community and outreach and social justice and whatever have you, because that becomes the content of your faith without the sacraments. So it's, and this is an oversimplification, but it becomes all style. It becomes all preference. Whereas, if we want to have a mature conversation about, is it okay to church hop? You want to examine your own motivation and say, is this a substance issue? Is this a style issue? Why am I drawn elsewhere?
Yeah.
I think you both raise a good distinction, because I want to say right off the bat, there's nothing wrong. I gave my example about me trying to catch Sunday Mass when I was at university. There's nothing wrong with that. If you need to catch Sunday Mass, we're obligated to be at Sunday Mass. So if for some reason your parish that weekend is not offering a time where you can get to Mass, then please, by all means, go somewhere else. But I think the distinction you guys are making here is that someone who's like a serial hopper, and why I say that that's probably not good is because we are meant, as Catholics, yes, we have distinctions, we have preferences and things like that, but it's also really good to be in community. And this is why we come together on the Lord's Day as a Catholic community to worship together. And I think some people do church hop to avoid the community. People slip in the back, sit, and then next Sunday they'll go somewhere else. Or there are some people who who might go to the same place for a while and switch, but never incorporate themselves within the community. And I think while we are fulfilling our Sunday obligation, that's all we're doing. We're not letting the gospel sort of transform us or take root in our lives, right? Because we're called to service. So if we're just sneaking in all the time, now granted, again, going back to my university days, I was sometimes at a point where I was just sneaking in and going to Mass. And there were other points in my life where I was very involved in the parish. So it does fluctuate,
Yeah.
But always being a serial hopper and avoiding the community, I don't think is good. Definitely not good for your own spiritual life, because we do need our brothers and sisters in the Christian faith to encourage us, to speak with us, to correct us sometimes, but also the church needs it too. The church needs all of our brothers and sisters to be part of the community, right? And I think that's where I see an issue with it. Now, you brought up a good point about what happens if there's something going on at your parish that's not right. Like you said, there was something about something about the Eucharist that's not being treated right. Obviously, that is
I brought it up, and so to give you an idea of what happened with what ended up kind of making us move, because again, the music was great. They had children's liturgy. They're a very welcoming community, but it wasn't the priest that was being disrespectful with the Eucharist, but it was Eucharistic ministers, and there was extraordinary ministers. Yeah, sorry, yeah, and so there was problems there that was going on, and so I remember bringing it to the priest and saying, "Okay, I'm having a problem with this. Is this something that we can fix? Is this something that like that this?" And I remember him saying, "Well, I've tried a couple of times, so it's just like it kind of was. The result was it's not going to happen. We're not going to be able to fix it." And I was just like, "Okay." Okay, then I think I'm going to have to leave because, I need you to fix it. You should fix it. But also, if this is not something that's going to change, then I'm going to go somewhere. And we went to the place, and again, they didn't have children's liturgy, and it had bad music, like real bad music. But but the reverence was there, and we were actually able to dive in deeper into our faith in that community. And not only that, but not because we were there, but because I think the priest and the atmosphere and the way it was, the priest had just gotten there as well. But we were able to flip that church around to be a welcoming community, a loving community, because we were able to pinpoint, we went to Coffee Sunday as a family. They had Coffee Sunday after every second Sunday or something like that. We went to every single Coffee Sunday for 5 or 6 weeks, and no one talked to us the entire time we were there. But I was able to point that out to the priest, and he said, that's a major problem. So he put a committee together, and then changes were starting to happen. So what I saw was a church community that was willing to grow, willing to change, willing to, not for me, but just to acknowledge faults and failings and change those things. So I could really be a part of that,
Yeah, and you get these kind of unfortunate names that go along with this or maybe the unhealthy version of this attitude. You have like cafeteria Catholics, or you
buffet.
have kind of this buffet but like all of those analogies imply a taking. I'm here to take something from this, and if I'm not getting what I want, I'm moving on, or I'm going somewhere else. But like that's not a complete or healthy version of. So the example that you just gave is, a lot of times people leave a parish or go somewhere else because the grass is greener. There's a problem here, and it's going to be fixed over there, or like. But there's something to be said for if you're really excited about liturgy or music or whatever, like you're depriving that parish community of that insight or of that expertise, of that perspective. Like if you're a musician and you're like, the music here is like, offer to do music, get involved. Like so you have an attitude of just I'm here, but I'm not just here to take. Like, look for opportunities to give. Look for opportunities to give in a way that's aligned with your gift or aligned with kind of the area of faith that allows you to grow, but also allows the community to grow as well.
Yeah, and on that note too is I'm trying to think of the reasons why people leave the church that they are part of and go to another church. And as a priest, I know that when there's a change in the pastor,
that's a big one, for sure.
Like people will just up and leave, or people will have no intention of stick around for the next priest. I think that is very wrong. Like I've experienced that in my own life. When I moved to a parish, there were people who were like, who didn't even wait for me to arrive, and they were gone. And people who were around when I arrived and told me how much they disliked me, even though they had just met me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there are people who do that. And I think if we're rooted in the community, if we're rooted in the community, then we want to see our community thrive, right? So that's another reason, like why people just up and leave and start going somewhere else. And
so let's go on that though, because there is times where if a priest was to move in and the priest, let's say you have a good parish priest and you got a really good community that's thriving, and then a priest was to leave, and then a new priest was to come in, and they're not doing all the things. Obviously, you got to give some wiggle room. Obviously, there's going to be some change, and each pastor is going to have their own gifts, their own charisms that are going to bring forth to the parish. And so you want to be able to let them sort that out themselves, as well as back them on that, right? But what happens if you get a priest that's just not, that's just living out his job as a priest instead of a vocation? Does that make sense? Like, how do we reconcile that? Because at St. Alphonsus, where I go to church and stuff, if you're the pastor there now, but if you were to leave and stuff, and someone was to come in and just do mass, and that's all they cared about and everything else. But at another church, my family can grow. My family can, I might make that hop. You know what I mean? So how do we? But at the same time, we have a real strong community at St. Alphonsus, or even at Holy Name here, that we don't that I'm infused in, being youth ministry as well as music and those things. How do we reconcile? Because I don't want to leave, but I'm still not. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. How do you qualify that decision? Or how do you, what kind of criteria can you employ, or what do you kind of appeal to? And I think it does. You do take an honest look at yourself, or why are you why are you inclined to jump ship?
Yeah.
And it's like, is this something? Is this a matter of preference? Is this a matter of I would prefer this, that, or the other thing, or is this actually becoming an unhealthy community? And will I thrive more in a healthier community? And it might be one of those solvable problems.
Yeah.
That let's get a parish committee together. Let's
Maybe I have to get involved and do something.
Or have a discussion with your priest, have a discussion with your bishop about what can be done to improve the situation. And then, if your attempts are going nowhere, or if you don't see any kind of practical way of solving the problem, then you're probably more justified in looking elsewhere. Than you would be if you're just like, oh, this isn't my kind of, this isn't my preference for what a priest should be.
I think change is good. I think change is good.
I agree.
And change, it can be difficult, but change can be good. So, if a priest leaves, I think, maybe the way things are done are starting to change or whatever. But sometimes that's good. and sometimes, like, there's every time, there's a priest change, there's always some people who are sad and some people who are just so
grumble.
excited.
Yeah.
Like when I leave my parish, there are going to be so many people who are excited when I leave. That's what happens. So sometimes change is good. I think, Matt, your point is it, am I not happy here now because I'm sad or because there's change?
Yeah.
Or is this becoming an unhealthy place for my family to worship? I think it's a great way to look at things, right? And I think also, to be fair, we're not there for the priest. I know the priest sometimes makes it easier.
No, I agree with you.
There are a lot of people who say, like, we have so many missionary priests in Canada, and God bless them. Like, I'm so happy that they're here because we have priests in our parishes today because they're here from other countries.
Yeah.
Some people say, well, I can't understand him. And then they get up and leave. Yeah. And it's like, well, I don't even know if you've given this blessed man a chance. Like, and I think that's wrong. I think we have to give more benefit of the doubt to our missionary priests because they are here and they love being here, and our priests who are born and raised in our diocese. Everyone has gifts, everyone has certain things. So yes, if it's just because you're upset or you're
it's not good
sad,
enough.
It's probably not a good thing. And sometimes different shepherds, different pastors, they reach different parts of our spiritual life.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
So I think sometimes not always a great idea just to leave.
I think when you're talking about switching up priests and stuff too, one of the things we talked about is if a priest was doing something wrong for, let's say, 5 years, and then a new priest comes in, they can correct that and then offer a new way of doing something. And then having priests switch out is also a great way of making sure that your sheep are tended to fully, as you were saying, in the different areas in different ways, which is great. But then, like you said, for us, so the other thing that I would kind of mention is if you're having a problem with your priest or if you're having a problem in the parish, then bring it to prayer. Bring it to pray and ask God, what is the direction that I'm supposed to take with this? And be open to it. Like maybe it is that you're supposed to step up, or maybe it is that you're supposed to ask someone to step up. You know?
And I would also say to pray about what's bothering you because I've had the situation that's happened where people have come to hop over to a parish that I've been at because they're disgruntled at their former parish. And then it's only a matter of time when they get disgruntled with me or our parish, and then they go and jump to another parish. And then it's happened where they've come back around. And now they're back here because they're disgruntled over there. And it's like, I would like for people to pray about, like, what is that? What exactly are we disgruntled? And like, what are we searching for? Are we rooting our faith in Jesus? Are we appreciating the sacraments? Or are we, like, what exactly are we looking for? Right? Yeah. There's also another side of this too. It's like people who don't church hop. It's like people who have been at the same parish for 80 years and come hell or high water, they are there at their parish. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with belonging to a parish for a long time. Some people wear it as a badge of honor. Like, I've been here for 100 years and whatever it might be, right?
Get an endurance medal.
I think, though, for people in that situation, it's really good to pray about where you're at. Because sometimes it just happens where it's like, we're here because this is our parish, and maybe we're not as much engaged anymore by the community, or we're not engaged anymore by the gospel. We're not engaged anymore by the prompting of the Holy Spirit moving me to do something. We're just here because this is my parish,
Yeah.
And so I think that that could be another issue for people.
Each parish too has their own flair. I remember talking with the bishop that I was working with, and he says, well, like we were talking about youth groups and youth ministries and stuff, but he's talking about how each parish has their own flair, and it depends on the pastor, but like the community itself has their own flair. You know what I mean? And their own charism, if you will. And talking about which way does this tend with the community? Which way does this lean with the community? And kind of figuring out for you as a person too, sometimes it's good for you to pray about, where am I supposed to go? Where am I, like if you've been there for 80 years, let's say, then what are you supposed to be doing in this community that you're not doing right now? You know, how, because I'm going to say, if you've been there that long, then your church starts to slowly die, then you're part of the problem. You know what I mean? Like
That's a good point.
To make sure that getting off the feet, but also making sure that people are feeling welcomed and the new blood is coming in and being listened to.
Now, like you said, every parish has its sort of charism or gift. So in that sense, I will say that it's fine. Like, let's say, for example, in the city where we live, like youth ministry basically happens in our parish.
Yes, that's right.
So anyone across the city who's looking for youth ministry, whether it's teenage ministry or young adult ministry or whatever it might be, they come to our parish, but they're actually members or parishioners of another parish. And I think that's good. I think that's building a greater community amongst Catholics, right? So, and for example, another parish might have a strength in another area, right? And so we encourage parishioners to, instead of every single parish having, like something that's not working as strong as it can be. And it depends, of course, on the geography, on the location, on the city, on the number of Catholics, on the number of parishes, the number of priests.
But there's some parishes that are like quite literally like within a block or 2 blocks in the bigger cities. They're 2 or 3 blocks from each other, and so knowing that, like recognizing those flares, feeding those charisms, like if we're youth ministry, and then one of the other churches is feeding the poor, feeding the hungry, and then another parish is community, whatever the case, or feeding, maybe helping the sick or helping feeding those areas, and you can still belong to your parish. Like we know a lot of young people that belong to our youth group that come to our youth group, but on Sundays they go and altar serve at their own parishes, right? Or they're at their own parishes on Sunday, but then anytime we're doing stuff, they're coming to our parish to be a part of it. So they're part of the Catholic community of the region, which is kind of really cool.
And they're involved in the community.
I
think that's at the end of the day. We're not just church hopping for no reason. We are involving ourselves in the greater community. And I think that's at the end of the day what is okay. I mean, you look at people who, for example, they'll go to daily mass wherever they can find it. Like that's okay. We're not saying that you can't do that. Like there are some parishes that offer better times for daily mass. People work during the day. There's a noon mass somewhere on your lunch break, or some people might have an 8 a.m. before work starts, or if you're retired, you go to the 9 o'clock, or if there's an evening mass or whatever it might be. You go wherever if you feel called to attend a daily mass, go for it. But at the end of the day, like it's important that we're not hiding from a community. The other thing I want to bring up is some Catholics who, when traveling or when invited to certain events, on Sunday will attend a Protestant church instead of a Catholic mass. And say like, oh, I was out of town on the weekend, but I was staying with my aunt and uncle, and they go to the Pentecostal church, so I joined them for mass on Sunday. That is not okay. Well, and let me be clear. It does not fulfill your Sunday obligation.
Yeah, exactly.
You are welcome to go with your aunt and uncle to a Pentecostal service
and sing praise and worship with them.
Sing with them, or whatever it might be.
We're not allowed to receive communion,
but
though.
It does not fulfill your Sunday obligation. It does not replace you being at Catholic Mass that Sunday. That is not okay in that sense. And if you are at a church, like let's say the Anglican community or something like that presents communion bread,
Yeah.
you are not to participate in it at all.
We've talked about this on previous podcasts, but just to bring it up, and there are good reasons, because we're not in communion with them. We don't believe the same thing they believe. We believe some of the things, but we're not in communion with them, and it's not the body and blood of Christ. It's not. They don't believe that.
The same if you're going to a funeral or a wedding in another Christian church that's not Catholic. You are not to present yourself to receive their communion bread. And again, it does not fulfill your Sunday obligation.
Now there are some churches. I mean, they're Catholic,
Right.
So there are like the Byzantine Rite or the Ukrainian Catholic churches, and those are different sects, different rites of the same Catholic Church, and so because of those ones, so you can go and receive at the Byzantine Church, at the
church that's in communion with the
Catholic
Church,
Church.
the Roman Catholic Church. So we're the Latin Rite of the Roman Catholic Church. Then there is, like you said, the
Ukrainian and
Catholic
the
Church,
Byzantine.
They're all
Coptic.
in communion with the Catholic Church, so you can attend there. That does fulfill your Sunday obligation.
Yeah, okay.
And you can participate in the Eucharist.
Yeah, fine.
There. Yeah. Okay, so what about I think at the end of the day here, the point of searching for a place to worship is that, yes, it's important to find where you feel comfortable, because we don't want you just going to the same place forever if you're not being spiritually fed.
Yes.
We need to grow in our Christian faith. So if that means I go to Mass here on Sunday, but on Tuesday I go to Bible study at another community or a youth group on a Thursday or whatever it might be, then that's fine. You're part of the community. You're part of the community, and you're being spiritually fed.
And more than that, the kind of cross-pollination that occurs there enriches the community as a whole. That it's like you do have that rootedness within your parish community, but you're also involved and engaged with other parishes,
Other Catholics,
in the area.
right?
Yeah.
It's true, and that's why it's really beautiful when, for example, the Knights of Columbus get together. All these different councils get together, or the Catholic Women's League, different councils get together. It's a beautiful thing to show, how large the
Universal
Christian community is in your community, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it's really important that at the end of the day, we are focused on nourishing our spiritual life.
Yeah.
That's the key. So if you're saying my family will be better suited somewhere else, then you'll have to make the difficult decision to change. But if you're always making the change, I think
There's something different
to think about what is going on in my heart, what is going
Makes
on
sense.
in my mind. If it's something as simple as I like going to Tuesday night Mass here, and but I go to my parish on Sunday, that's a good thing. Or if it's like I like to go to confession at that church because it's not my priest, that's a totally different thing, right? But I think if we're continually moving, and we're not planting ourselves anywhere,
There's a deeper something deeper at work there.
we have to nourish ourselves somewhere, right? The church has what it's called a domicile. So a domicile is somewhere where a person lives, like your place of residence that you've been for a number of years, and every domicile has a parish. So every person
house
lives in a parish boundary. And it used to, back in the day, be like, that's the parish you belong to. So whatever parish church is in your boundary, like around your domicile, around the place where you live, that is the place where you go to receive the sacraments, where you are entitled to go receive the sacraments and be part of the parish. And even though, let's say, you're not officially registered there, because of your domicile, that is your parish.
Now that makes sense too. Back in the olden days, if you're like horse and buggy time, or like you're going to the closest church where your house lives, like for the most part, anyways, right? Like you're going to that. You're in this town, and that's the church.
We walked to church when I was growing up, right? Because there was a church just a couple blocks from us. So, does that have some weight in the Catholicism today? Yes, it does. It doesn't mean that you're restricted to that parish, but everyone still has a domicile. It's different if you've just moved somewhere or wherever it might be. You have to establish yourself in your domicile. Some people might have two domiciles, for example, they have a summer home, and a winter home or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, like the church does have something where, like, if you want to get married outside of your domicile, like outside of the parish boundary, there's a letter from your pastor, even though you might not even attend that church. The pastor of your proper parish has to write a letter saying, "Yeah, go for it, get married somewhere else," or with baptism. Like those are the things, the structure of the church. Now, because everyone's in cars and moving around, and churches are closed, and the churches aren't as everywhere as they used to, you don't see this focus on domicile anymore or sticking within your parish boundary. There are some churches that do it, and some churches that don't. But at the end of the day, if you're crossing town because you like this restaurant better or whatever it might be, and that might be the mentality, right? I like this church better, so I go there. And again, if you're being spiritually fed, if you are growing in your faith, and not just because you like it, like there's something about like, oh, I like it here, but my spiritual life is not growing. Sometimes we do need to be challenged.
Yes.
Sometimes we do need to look honestly at our faith life and say, have I grown? Has my spiritual life deepened? Am I better today in my spiritual life than I was last year? And if the answer is no, then why? Could be my fault. Could be my own I'm not committing to my personal prayer, or it could be every Sunday when I go to mass, maybe the preacher, whether it's a deacon or a priest, is not preaching on the gospel. Maybe they're preaching about something else. Maybe they're telling stories from their own life instead of talking about Jesus. Like all those things contribute to, where are we being fed? And if that is the issue, then people have a decision to make.
Yeah, agreed. And taking it to prayer to make those decisions is a big part. Because for me, it was very clear. God made it very clear to us that we were supposed to move, because I took it to prayer, and then things happened that made it okay. No, we got to leave. We got to leave for us. We got to go to this other parish.
And that discernment can look different at different life stages as well.
Sure.
Like when you're talking about like your family and a good place for them to be rooted and to grow. I can give so. When I was becoming Catholic, after I had done our CIA, in my domicile, there was a parish there, but I went to the Basilica because selfishly, and part of the life stage, that one of the things that drew me to Catholicism was beauty and architecture and the theology of a church that was like deliberate about it constructing itself in that way, that I was being formed by this space, and I had connected with the pastor there. So that was a very formative part of my life. So it was in that case, it was a better situation for me to be in that environment, even though it wasn't strictly in my domicile. That was part of the discernment, or part of the kind of justification of why I would go somewhere else.
Yeah, and just thinking about, one of the reasons why I left a parish, or stopped going to mass there, I should say, on my routine when I was working and trying to catch masses, I just didn't think that what was being preached about was correct. Like there was a priest who was saying things that were not true to the Catholic teachings. And unfortunately, that happens today. In this world where people are following political ideologies or whatever it might be, that happens. People just jump on the bandwagon. Or, sometimes we have poorly formed ministers in the church, whether they're permanent deacons or a priest, whatever it might be, and they're preaching about things that are maybe pleasing to the ear but aren't correct. And so that was one of the reasons that I left, or I stopped going to mass at certain churches. And it's too bad, because there's two problems there. One, the people who are going there for mass aren't getting fed. And two, the people who are staying there aren't being challenged, and in fact are learning about things that aren't right, and it's forming their faith or forming their conscience in a way that's not right. Those are all things to consider. They're all things to consider when you go to a parish, or you stay at a parish, or you leave a parish. So yeah, that's my considerations for today. But honestly, at the end of the day, we have to be examining our spiritual life and seeing are we growing? Are
Yeah.
we growing, or are we just staying stagnant? If you want to share with us a time when you left the parish, or
What drew you to a
what drew
parish?
you to
Yeah.
a parish. What's happening in your parish that's beautiful. What's happening in your parish that's not beautiful. Share with us. Leave it in a comment here on our social media, or a YouTube video, or wherever you're watching or listening to this. Or you can send us a direct email at askus@thecatholicbuzz.com. So that's all the time we got today. So thank you, Josh, and thank you, Matt. My name is Father Daniele. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.